Turns out that the Quality Learing Center, specifically Quality Learning Center, has received 13 violations and has been investigated multiple times just in the last 4 years by the Department of Human Services in Minnesota. And as you guys can see, these are all the list of various violations and investigations of this place. Since May 9th, 2022, they've been investigated and received violations over 13 different times. For things like children did not have daily access to interest areas that are used by children are not in good repair, crib mattresses and/or sheets did not meet the safety requirements. They even got a violation because the program did not report a death, serious injury, fire, or emergency properly. Obviously, the state has been looking into this place for a while, so it makes you question why didn't they notice the amount of fraud there. All it took was Nick Shirley pulling up to the place and seeing that there's no children there to determine that obviously something is wrong here. You have people coming from the state 13 different times in the last 4 years and they didn't notice this? Obviously, this is something that needs to be looked into to see just how much did state and city officials play a role in all of this fraud.
We got a big update today on the Somali Daycare situation because apparently the infamous Quality Learing Center, that's right, the one with the misspelled sign that partly helped this story go so viral in the first place, has just closed down. That is right. Nick Shirley at this rate is going to end more political dynasties than Trump by the time he's 35. I mean, he's already taken down Tim Walz. Now we got the Somali Daycare machine. This guy is on a generational run and he's basically my age, I think, right? What is he, like 23 years old? So props to him, certainly. But I do have to ask to the Quality Learing Center themselves, what happened? I thought you were a legitimate business. Because I have to say, the entire chronicle here is really shady. So initially it comes out and everyone's mocking it and making fun of it, widely accusing it of fraud for quite obvious reasons. And they tried to do, first of all, this damage control tour to make themselves seem like a legitimate business. They fixed the spelling of the sign. They were doing press conferences with the business owner saying, no, we're completely legitimate. Ironically and strangely, the state government, aka Tim Walz, initially came out and said that the Quality Learing Center had been closed down for many years, and then they were forced to backtrack because it was apparently still open. It's all so strange, but apparently now, abruptly, after maybe facing too much backlash or realizing, oh, we got caught, they're just shutting down and likely running away with having profited thousands to millions of dollars from running the business that they did. And now they're taking the ball and going home. It's very quite interesting. But after all, I have to say, hey, if we were such conspiracy theorists the whole time, if all Nick Shirley was doing was harassing random daycares, then what's to explain for this kind of behavior? Of course, you might hear the excuse that, well, they can't operate the daycare anymore because there's too much harassment by right-wingers. But you'll see actually in the original period where they were trying to do the damage control, that's not true. Because here, allegedly, according to the media, right, according to CBS, was a legitimate business operating and kids actually going inside. But nonetheless, let's bring you this whole chronicle here today, right? Again, the main news, yes, Quality Learing Center has closed down, but I also want to show you some of the ways in which this rabbit hole on the Quality Learing folks may be running a little bit deeper than we even initially thought. It turns out shady stuff was going on here for years, and people did notice it. I don't want to say nobody noticed it, but it was not a national news story for obvious reasons. And interestingly, Tim Walz in the state of Minnesota sat by and did nothing. Here we're seeing more proof, right? They were in on it. They were covering up for this type of stuff because, you know, he can run around now all he wants and claim, we've always been fighting the fraud. We've always been against the criminals. But the evidence shows, no, you only became against the criminals when, or allegedly it became against the criminals when a national spotlight was finally shown on the situation. So let's get into all of it, guys. Hilarious news. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. And I would like to start out today by showing you a local news clip from ABC as of 2024, just to demonstrate, because I want you to remember all of the coping you heard from liberal media about this. He's not a real journalist. You can't just go knock on random doors and investigate daycare centers. What proof does he have that fraud is going on? And yet, strangely, up until 2 seconds ago, at least on the local level, the so-called real journalists in legacy media were saying the same exact thing. So it is once again pretty odd to see mainstream media people contradicting themselves as to their own definition of what real journalism is. But just notice this for a moment. Again, the rabbit hole here apparently has been going on for many years.
I started by visiting Quality Learning Center Daycare.
So it is that 14B.
Which sits right in the heart of downtown Minneapolis. Between 2019 and 2023, the Minnesota Department of Human Services found 95 violations at this location. They range from failure to keep hazardous items away from children to no records for 16 children, which include things like immunizations, emergency contacts, and medical needs. So state investigators placed Quality Learning Center on a conditional license in 2022. I went to the daycare's location several times, and only once did I see people there.
Oh, that's your daycare.
But I did not see any children.
So there are 80 kids in there?
No.
After school? Okay, gotcha. All right, thank you.
DHS declined an interview, but in a statement acknowledged Quality Learning Center was put on a conditional license because of its poor safety record. But it still received nearly $8 million in taxpayers' money since 2019. Its conditional status removed in 2024.
Its conditional status being removed in 2024, meaning what exactly? Despite the fact that they failed safety inspections, there's missing records for children. Allegedly, they have these children at the daycare. The state, by the way, is giving them money, allegedly, apparently $8 million, right, to take care of these kids. You have no records of the kids. It was already under investigation by Minnesota DHS, and yet at the end of it, what did they do? Still gave them $8 million, despite obvious problems with it, right? And then, secondly, apparently took them off of investigation status. So, and this is in 2024, by the way. You know, it does appear that they've apparently changed locations ever since, but that, by our understanding, is the same exact business. And notably, too, right? I thought this was not real journalism, right, liberals? I mean, you can't just go to a daycare, notice that it's empty, and allege that something shady might be going on there. Where's your evidence? Where's your fact-checking on that? Huh. Yeah. Remember this rhetoric, by the way?
Who is he? Like, who gave this guy license to go around and say, I couldn't get into daycare centers, the doors were locked? Like, nobody should be able to walk into a daycare center because the doors are locked. These random vigilante justice seekers who ordain themselves like some sort of law enforcement expert, like he's a random YouTuber. And I just find it laughable that the party of the self-proclaimed pro-life people are celebrating cutting off funding to children. White evangelical crowd who purports to uphold these Christian values are celebrating targeting communities because of their ethnicity and cutting off care to children.
So that's the funny part about this whole chronicle. Despite the mainstream media whining about Nick Shirley, when you really break it down, in at least some sense, I understand it's local news, but it's still ABC, right? You could argue that mainstream media actually found this story before Nick Shirley did. They did very similar reporting. Actually, it's almost identical to what Nick Shirley did. Hey, go to the daycare. Notice that it's never open. There's no one actually in there. You talk to the owner. The owner seems shady. Look at the state records. Same exact thing Nick Shirley did, right? And apparently now, however, that's not quote-unquote real journalism. Hey, you can't just go knock on the door of a daycare. Hey, who are you? Yeah, ABC News apparently. Are they just vigilante justice seekers as well? It's so ridiculous. I mean, I'm not going to get too much more into that. We understand that these people are liars. Fundamentally, CNN and others are likely bitter that these so-called just YouTubers like us, like Nick Shirley, right, are apparently dwarfing them now in cultural and real-world influence. But that said, okay, so this is established. The Quality Learing Center has been extremely suspicious for years. They do appear now to have changed locations. But I would also like to point out the timeline here that led up to them closing, because first and foremost, when it all initially blew up, right, the Quality Learing Center, apparently the Walz administration tried to respond by saying that that daycare had closed, right? So in other words, you can accuse us of fraud, nothing's going on, we closed that down years ago, it's not active, except it rapidly became clear that was not true. So I'm just pointing out, it's all strange from the beginning, because was this an attempt by the Walz administration to basically run damage control and they got caught in a lie? Not exactly sure, but check it out, right?
Department of Children, the lady, the commissioner, Tiki Brown said you guys were closed a week ago, and now you guys are open right now. This is not true what you guys are saying.
I don't have anything to do with that business.
Fraud.
I don't have anything to do with that business. What you got on? Oh my God. You're the infamous Nick Shirley who's getting dollars off of YouTube.
I have a question. If someone could answer.
Yeah, so as if it was not already suspicious enough that there's a long record of this business having some issues with their documentation, if it wasn't enough that the sign is misspelled and the phone number on the sign apparently was not even real, like you call it, it goes to nothing. Is this not also a little bit strange, right? What was up with that? Why did the Walz administration say the business was closed when it was not? And even news reporting from last year actually shows that they allowed that business to stay open. Was it just an innocent mistake? I mean, I guess it could be pure DEI incompetence, but after all, you would think that's something you double check when it was already a huge national news story and scandal. Or was it, of course, right, a form of damage control? Like they really did, they probably knew the chronicle of all the fraud that they were engaging in, right? $8 million, let's clear the business even though they're obviously up to no good. And essentially that was all said to cover the tracks. Oh yeah, we closed down that business when we didn't. I don't know. That's kind of checkpoint number one. And another reason I say, let's repeat this, right? This is not just a story about Somali fraud. It's about the fact that the state of Minnesota abetted and likely engaged, and the politicians, right, got kickback from that very Somali fraud. But it doesn't stop there, okay? So you have that whole confusion. The government says it's closed, it's still open. Then, just around, I think what was around New Year's Eve, yes, if I'm correct there, the supposed owners, the managers of Quality Learing Center, first of all, fixed the sign. So, clearly showing, oh, we're trying to do some PR reputational repair here. And then secondly, you even had this guy doing an informal press conference trying to explain to everyone that the world was lying about his business, right? This is a legitimate thing, and take a listen.
A lot of the journalism that's been going on the last couple of days has been really dishonest. I don't want to point fingers at anybody, but I do feel like what was done was someone came to our building outside of operating hours. When there's a specific sign on our door that says our days and our hours, he came outside of those hours and then claimed, hey, they're closed and they're still making money. They're using taxpayer money to work. And it's like, you don't come outside of operational hours and then say they're using taxpayer money. That was completely false.
Right. So there you see them trying to defend themselves and affirm that they actually are a legitimate business, despite the fact that they claim to be educating children and cannot even spell. But then suddenly we got the rather abrupt news this week after allegedly, right, according to the media, they're operating while the whole scandal is going on. There's still kids going inside. As you can see from the New York Post, Minnesota's infamous Quality Learing Center is now suddenly closed, records have said. Here's the story. So they're officially closed for business. Quality Learing Center, the shady Minnesota daycare at the center of the state's mushrooming fraud scandal, shuttered for good this week, according to reports. The much ridiculed daycare, which operated under a misspelled sign until it was fixed last month amid national outrage. Yeah, it kind of seems like they until someone was noticing, until someone was paying attention, they didn't care to fix that sign. Probably because they knew they were not operating a legitimate business, allegedly. But anyways, closed Tuesday after it requested a closure of its license, according to the Minnesota Department of Human Services and the Department of Children. It's worth noting too, by the way, even after this whole thing, Mr. Tim Walz, we're going to prosecute the fraud. It wasn't the state that closed down the business. It was the business themselves that closed down the business. If I were to guess the reason for that, right? Let's use our common sense. Very likely because they want to get the heat off of them, right? It's that simple. Let's not draw more attention. Hey, to a degree, we kind of got busted here. We already made millions of dollars. Let's try to get out while we're ahead because, hey, after all, is Tim Walz going to do anything about it? Absolutely not. Unless, of course, he is under so much pressure that he has to act, but now he's going to, it's already closed, who cares, right? But anyways, the center found itself under the national spotlight after conservative YouTuber Nick Shirley featured the facility in a video highlighting daycares in the state that were allegedly receiving public funds, but were not providing any services. Shirley famously pointed out that the center's sign had an embarrassing typo on it, which was eventually corrected, while the owner had blamed the error on a graphic design snafu. Okay. And how long did you leave that up for? Oh, we accidentally spelled it wrong. Yeah, and you didn't bother to fix it? Interesting. The image, probably because you don't know how to spell, the image became an instant meme with Linda McMahon claiming the center was part of the widespread fraud scheme taking place in Minnesota's Somali community. Well, considering even the past record of Quality Learning Center Incorporated, even at their prior location, which appears to be proven by local news, I wonder why that could be the case. But anyways, the Quality Learning Center's last licensing review came in June 2025, when it was once again cited for several violations, but no evidence of fraud was ever reported according to the state. So even in 2025, they're still being cited for all these different violations, including kids who mysteriously don't seem to have their full records and documentation actually registered with a daycare. So you can say that's not evidence of fraud, but considering the allegation here is that they're billing the government, for instance, for like 40 or 80 kids, and there's no kids actually inside, and then you look into which kids they're writing down as being there, they don't even have their full documents. It seems pretty close to evidence of fraud, if you ask me. But of course, as it pertains to the state of Minnesota, when you never investigate fraud, it's pretty easy to not find fraud, isn't it? Despite the agency originally stating that the center had closed last week, as we pointed out, right? So they said that based on nothing. Because even in June 2025, it's not like they had to dig through some old records. The state of Minnesota allowed them to keep operating and then claims, oh, well, they had closed. They didn't close. The state records never said they closed. Where did anyone get this idea that the center was closed? I don't know. But a big question there for the Walz administration. A visit from the Post had found it was still operating on December 29th, with at least 20 kids seen entering the facility. And that's worth pointing out too, by the way. So, it's kind of unclear whether there were actually kids going in there before, but it did appear, at least this would be my suspicion, right? As a result of the damage control, hey, now we understand eyes are on us. Hey, let's actually bring the kids in. Let's have the community basically cover up here for our own alleged crimes. At least that's a possibility. I'm just going to point that out. But no official reason for the center's sudden closure one Tuesday was given, according to state records. The provider is unable to reopen without reapplying here for a license, to which I say, I mean, let's point that out, right? If this was a legitimate business, if there's all these kids and families who are actually relying on this daycare, and by the way, it's primarily Somalis, so it's actually all Somalis, I should say. So I don't necessarily buy the argument that, because of the bad PR, we can no longer operate. According to you, right, on December 29th, after this was already a huge national scandal, allegedly 20 kids are still going to this daycare. No, I don't buy the explanation that it's just being closed due to harassment. Actually, because, I guess this is a question I should be asking. What are the kids who allegedly are relying on this daycare going to do now?
Talk to a mother dropping off her kids.
I take my kids here, 2 o'clock to 10. Yeah, there's a lot of kids inside.
Right, so the point I'm making here is that allegedly, according to them, there are still kids in this daycare. They're showing the media, actually, look, there's kids in this daycare. So it doesn't seem to me that they're actually, in that case, struggling for business, or according to them, that the Nick Shirley expose had any impact on whether they could effectively run the daycare. Because after all, it's a legitimate business. Look, CBS News is showing you right now, the kids are going inside. So why would you abruptly close down? If not for the fact that you understand, oh shoot, we've been busted here. This problem is not going away for us. The little damage control didn't work because nobody believes us. Let's basically shut down and try to flee. I don't know, just something I would point out. I'd also like to point out too, by the way, going back to this initial issue of the mainstream media getting so mad that an independent journalist actually did something and they are refusing to acknowledge it, or frankly, they didn't do it themselves. I mean, their local affiliates did, but they didn't listen, right? Quietly, in the days following since have made admissions like this right here. Audits completed in the past 10 years show that Minnesota has lacked the teeth to properly vet attendance records and go after possible fraudsters proactively. Oh, so what you're admitting here is that we're not such conspiracy theorists, right? Actually, there is a fraud problem in Minnesota. And actually, yeah, the attendance records are shady, by the way, because what is our accusation? They're not actually kids in these daycares. And then quietly, after spending like an entire week again being outraged at us melting down, oh, suddenly now that's what they're admitting. Oh, yeah, they don't properly vet attendance records. They can't go after fraudsters. Their mechanisms to do that are extremely weak. Gee, you don't say. So we were right all along, huh? Seems like that point is being vindicated time and time again. And one more time, I'd just like to acknowledge there is no way a level of a fraud scheme this deep and this widespread, and this out in the open, by the way, it's not like these people are particularly smart, could possibly have happened without the well-known knowledge of people like Tim Walz and everyone operating in the state government, which further proves our point, right, that the Democrat Party is running a criminal enterprise. Just going to say that.
I think Tim Walz should resign because it's very clear either that he knew about the fraud in Minneapolis, he knew about the welfare fraud, or at the very least he looked the other way. I mean, this is not... This is not like Lex Luthor, right? This is not movie villain fraud. This is the lowest IQ possible fraud. This is, we're going to take we're going to take the absence of kids and set up a daycare center where there are no children, and we're going to call our early childhood education center the Quality Learing Center. By the way, if you can't spell learning, maybe you shouldn't be in early childhood education. But people got rich off of this. We know that there were schools who either had no enrollment or at least they overstated their enrollment. Tim Walz, either it was unbelievable incompetence or he was in on the fraud. That's one of the things we're going to get to the bottom of.
Well, we certainly continue to leer a lot about this, don't we? But I just want people to remember as well. As you see all these liberal protests in Minneapolis, as you even go back to the core issue they're protesting, which is the fact that a bunch of liberal agitators think it's okay to harass, impede, and even threaten the lives of ICE agents, that this is fundamentally what they're mad about, right? This is what the crazy liberals in the streets are trying to defend. This form of Somali fraud, taxpayer dollars being stolen, right? These alleged liberals, they care about the social services. They're actually defrauding these social services, right? They're making it actually the case that, by the way, Minnesota has a massive budgetary problem. But yes, literally, if you want to be a liberal, if you want to care about childcare, healthcare, all these things, blue states are in a situation where they're giving so much of that money to fraud, they can't actually pay to provide for the people who allegedly need or are actually entitled to receive these social services. So it's an issue, frankly, liberals should care a whole lot about, right? Because you wonder why you live in blue states and you vote Democrat and you think to yourself, well, the whole reason I'm voting Democrat is so that way I get the trade-off. Sure, they charge me higher taxes, but I get better health care and education. But it seems like I'm not getting better health care. I'm not getting better education. I'm not getting more of a helping hand from the government. That is actually the reason why, is because it's being lost to fraud. And yet liberals are protesting in favor of their own beloved social programs actually not working because that's how much they care to defend the criminal enterprise of the Somali fraudsters who I'm going to tell you right now do not have any clue who they are and certainly, don't care for the No Kings crowd either way because they just have no clue what's going on, right? Oh, protests? Oh, no, I'm just in the United States to defraud it. But anyways, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.